All right, so we're finally getting up here to my lease. I'm gonna kind of give you guys a tour and catch you up to speed. I've had this lease for, I think 2 years now, and I love it up here. You know, kind of ironic, we got the developed farm going in this farm. I'm gonna show you kind of the way each one of them flows through the year leading up to deer season. Most of my hunting has been done this style, you know, just kind of figuring out the deer, hunting them. Because a lot of the project farms that we buy, you know, if we buy them in time for me to deer hunt, usually there's been nothing done to them. By the time there's spend stuff done to them, they're sold. So ironically, this is, most of my hunting style is kind of like this. I like both of them just as much. They're a little bit different. I'd say the biggest difference is days on stand are a lot less on a fully developed farm, and also you can hunt a fully developed farm quite a bit more without putting the pressure on it. Like this farm here, a lot of recon, a lot of scouting, a lot of cameras, a lot of trying to figure out what's going on, and then just pick those days to shoot in and out. This farm specifically is pretty tough to egress, to get out, especially the further in the deer is that I'm hunting. I just gotta come out through so much and so many fields. So I really gotta, you know, get things figured out and slip in there and try and get it done quickly, because every day that it doesn't happen, you're just kind of making things harder on yourself. So we're gonna go around. I'm gonna show you some of my sets that are pre-hung and why they're pre-hung that way. So one of the things about this farm, just in general, like the layout and stuff, a lot of broken fields, and the woods are wide open hardwoods, and they tend to just go in off the fields and just fall. And I use this farm as an example a lot to people when we're doing consults and stuff. Like a lot of people want to just start cutting things and thicken and do all this and that to the habitat. And I use this as an example. This place is wide open hardwoods. It's not what a lot of people generally consider like awesome looking deer habitat or stuff. But the pressure on this farm, the way that I kind of try and hunt it, these deer love these open hardwoods because there's no pressure in there and they load up. It just takes some finesse. You can't just be bouncing in everywhere. And like I said earlier, it just takes some, you gotta really plan your hunts and not be blowing up the farm. I don't think we even came up here last year until almost what I consider late season. So it's wide open, it drops down. I'll show you how, like, you know, I think these deer on a farm like this kind of relate to the subtle changes, kind of like fishing, just subtle changes in the topography, and the deer relate to it. So I'll show you some of that and we'll go take a tour. So I wanted to get up here and video back in the winter time. Wintertime is the best time to scout after deer season, before green up, obviously. And I still, you know, do that, even though I know the farm, always learn some more stuff. Try and figure out what you watched from last deer season, and then, you know, translate it to some of the sign and stuff. And every year you just get a little better and better knowledge. But in the wintertime, two big things I like to do on a new farm or a farm I've hunted for a couple of years are, A, make what I kind of call a scrape map. So anytime I find a scrape and I'm scouting, I put it on the Onyx, especially a new farm, because it won't make sense at the time. You're just dropping pins. But as the year progresses and you start getting the deer on camera, or definitely when the season's progressing and you start playing the game, when you can look back at last year's scrapes, you can really, some of that stuff will really come to life, and it'll all start making sense, kind of like connect the dots. So I pin all those scrapes, and then the other thing I really like to do is pin beds. So anytime I find bedding areas, obviously they're generally, you know, going to be groups of does and stuff. When you find lots of beds like that, I like pinning those, because again, if you get to the rut and you're hanging hunting, you're bouncing around or whatever, it really helps to be able to see all of those bedding areas, because he knows where all those bedding areas are, and that's where he's going to go in the rut. So it really helps to know those two things. So did that in the winter time, scouted, you know, kind of put a couple more pieces of the puzzle together here. So we're down here in like the southwest corner of the farm. We got a deer on camera last year I think he was a 4-year-old last year. Gonna be a stud, I think. I'll show you some pictures of him. So that deer earlier in the season tended to, I think, favor this corner of the farm. And then he kind of seemed like he moved into the farm a little bit more as the season progressed. It could have just been, it was all corn and, you know, just tough to get cameras around and stuff earlier. At the end of last season, I did like kind of scatter a lot of cameras everywhere, just trying to really hone in on his core. There's a deer that was like, I think he was probably 5 last year or 6, and he's kind of a bully buck. Tried to come up here and get him with the muzzleloader to just open this area up so that this target deer for this year was as comfortable as possible in here, and he didn't have anybody pushing him around. And you know, as luck would have it, was I didn't get him shot, but I was here muzzleloader season, and wouldn't you know, the 4-year-old, I mean, I hang and hunt, and here he came 10 minutes later with the muzzleloader onto the flat, through the woods. I mean, for 10 minutes, walked right out under me at 30 yards. And so it was cool to see him, got me pumped up for this season. So this is the first spot we kind of stopping at today. There's an old fence, like an old cattle fence or something, that runs this entire line and kind of weaves in and out of the draws and this and that. And that fence is pretty stout. And ironically, right here where this little point is in the field, right in here, there's a hole in that fence. And also ironically, on the neighboring piece, it looks like they did some logging back there. It's kind of like a 3 corners, and there's a really good thicket, and it's kind of all relative to like bed, fence gap, feed. So I think that's why this spot's been so good. All these branches get lit up with scrapes, and I put a camera on that hackberry back there. So I'm gonna hang a stand. I didn't get to it. I was gonna do it today, but I got a tree in here picked out. I'm gonna pre-hang that stand. And it might be in the runnings for this deer this year, because he was here earlier in the season last year, and there is a bunch of scrapes and there's a bunch of stuff going on. One of the pieces of strategy that I'm gonna try and do is I'm gonna try and ask the farmer, this year it's beans, he'll probably let me buy back like a ½ acre somewhere. Don't know yet where that's gonna be. But one thing I might ask him to do is if I could do a little bit of overseeding, you know, some rye and turnips or something like that into those beans. A lot of times the farmers will let you do that because it's really just like cover cropping, which is a good standard farming practice, especially if you offer to go in and spray it the next year so that they don't have to deal with it. Generally, they're not going to care because they're going to be spraying anyway. But I am going to see if I can overseed a little green area right here in front of this stand. So that's, you know, a strategy we do on our farms and stuff, but it's something that's very easy. You know, work smarter, not harder, and you can generally, you know, get permission to do that, and it's just another concentrator. You can see how deep this ditch is behind, that goes up to this point, and that's super important in the month of October. You know, this is kind of what we're keying in on with this spot, is a buck coming out to the food, hitting scrapes right there that he's hit in the past. That ditch is gonna be a vacuum of air. When the sun goes down, I'm sitting there with a southwest or even a west blowing out into the field, because when that air stills and I expect him to come out here, it's gonna be a vacuum going straight down that ditch. So that's really important when you're not hunting with box blinds in October. And then you can see this fence is a hodgepodge. Like, it almost looks like I threw together some stuff I found to try and block the deer in this spot. But that's what this entire fence is. The entire length of this field just winds through these woods, and somehow it's in pretty good shape, other than, as far as to block deer, other than a few spots. So we'll show you this break. I mean, you can see it goes from hog wire to woven wire. And if you see in here, there's lots of scarred up old trees, rubs. And in my opinion, that's because there's a concentration of scent right here coming through this fence going up into the field the time of year that they're rubbing. You know, they get near this field and they're just getting rambunctious before they go out in the field. And so that's a fence gap. It's from there to there. And then there's a point with a wicked trail on it that goes straight down the hill and a big creek crossing. Saw that all in the winter time, and it's kind of what we're expecting to happen here if he is hitting these scrapes in October. Hunt it with a southwest, Comes out there, hits those scrapes. Our green might help concentrate does and up our chances of him being there. We already know there's a big deer here, so we're gonna be putting out a bunch of cameras, but generally, you know, the summertime, you're trying to find a big deer, so this time of year, maybe a little later, but early July, you know, you're trying to cast a really big net in order to locate a big deer. And once you locate them, you kind of find out some areas that maybe you're not gonna be hunting because there's not a big one or whatever. I just kind of start compiling the cameras and trying to learn as much about that deer's core as possible. So today it's so early in the year, we're just gonna put out a few cameras, but we'll come back probably in July and put out quite a bit more because we already do know there's a big deer probably gonna be in the area. And we're just trying to find out where he is, and then I'll add more cameras, especially when things change and they change their core and stuff and they get reclusive and start going hard horn. And once we, especially that time of year in September, once we kind of locate where they're at, I'll start moving and bringing more and more cameras in there and trying to hone in on exactly what he's doing. And it's really important, like, to pay attention to everything in the pictures, no matter what time of year it is, winter or whatever. Like, that's why I put a bunch of cameras out after the deer season last year, just trying to figure out like what trails he uses, you know, maybe what wind directions he's using those trails or that area or whatever. Because, you know, especially as you get into the deer season, a lot of times I'll hear people say, oh, well, he's nocturnal. Well, he's nocturnal because that's kind of what they do, but it's important to watch, like, what trail is he using to come into that food plot, or what wind is it on, or whatever, because all those things he does at night or any time of the year are the same thing he's going to do when you're trying to hunt them, because they're creatures of habit and they use the farm and the terrain and everything a certain way for a reason. So we're going to put out some cameras today, casting a wide net, trying to locate them. We'll start adding more cameras once we locate them, and just really try and learn everything about how he is using the farm to add to our knowledge of him. And generally, like, you know, this time of year, you're putting cameras on like pinches between food sources, or, you know, stuff like that, bean edges, but really funnels on the food. In this case, because this fence gap is so powerful and they're going to the food, my chances are really higher of getting pictures of them here than up on the field edge, I think, especially with all the tall grass. So kind of unique situation, but this camera's gonna face this gap in the woods here this summer. All right, so we're driving back in here. This is kind of like my main entrance to the farm. One of the challenges here is, like, there's all these little crop fields, and, you know, if this was my farm and I was developing it, I would definitely be grassing or CRPing these just to do away, you know, with having deer there, because I always bump a couple deer when I come out in these fields. So we're gonna pull up to a cool little spot right here. I've never hunted deer, and I don't know why I haven't ran a camera here, but I just think, you know, technically speaking, I think this could be like a no-brainer, a spot in the rut, like especially on those days where they're really putting on some miles looking for does. And we'll show you an aerial, and I'll kind of tell you what my thoughts are right here, strategy-wise. We'll hop out and I'll show it to you. So the very, very first night I ever hunted up here, I watched a deer walk this edge. And what the theory here is that in the rut, you have a big chunk of woods there that I know holds deer. They bed in it on the neighboring piece. And then you have a big chunk of timber on my piece that comes up and connects it. And then you got a hedgerow of natural cover, and there's like a low spot in the fence. You can kind of see the trail. It's hard to see it this time of year. But you just have a natural edge connecting 2 points of cover up and over. And in theory, you know, just trying to stack odds with our game planning process. In theory, if I'm a buck on one of those days and I'm really putting on miles looking for does, I'm gonna tend to be on the downwind side of that cover in that patch, and it's gonna lead me kind of to this corner, hop the fence, trying to stay tight to cover, and shoot right into this next point of woods. So I think, you know, I wouldn't hunt this with a northerly wind as much as I would hunt it with a southerly wind on this, I'm up in one of those trees, just because I think that in theory, he's more likely to be crossing here with that southerly wind. It's kind of a weird spot because it's right here where I access the farm. But when stuff hits the fan, I'm definitely gonna be putting a camera right here later in the year to kind of monitor this and just see if it's an area that he's using or not. Because if I can get pictures of him using this in the summer, well then I know, and if you want to get really crazy with it, like there's probably multiple crossings here and you can load it up with cameras and figure out which ones he prefers. But if I get him in the summer and I know that this is a known crossing that he uses, well, in the rut, he's gonna use it in the rut. There she is. This is this is ground zero on this farm. This is just kind of, it seems like where everything's happening, especially for this deer. So I got a lot to talk about here, but this is a spot that's good all year. I mean, I was hunting here late season, had some awesome encounters. Right over the hill is where I had the encounter with the deer I'm hoping is huge this year. 30 yards, came out, up and over, and walked right down this slot. It's a cove. It's kind of ground zero. It seems like everything comes together right here for these deer in the area.
So this area here is like kind of got the most exciting stuff going on for this season. Just stand right there. This is like a sweet little classic Illinois flat. It's got a little pitch to it, but there's a wicked pinch right here where they're rounding around the head of a ditch. They're also shooting across the field into an old logging road here. And the logging road is kind of side hills down here. Just everything comes together. If I could plant a food plot right there, it would be like money for this season. So what my hopes are is in early October. I got a lot of pictures of this deer down in here. What I did was I hung this stand up here. I'm not crazy about what the thermals are going to do. Again, it would be an awesome spot for a box, but there's not a whole lot I can do. I don't want to get too far back in here because I'll start blowing deer up. So I hung in a little tiny hackberry in front of a huge tree with cover. And I hung a hemp rope here and kind of open up the path of least resistance. I'm gonna, if there's any scrapes that pop up, which there wasn't, I'm gonna cut them down. And what I'm hoping to do is, by a little subtle strategy, is eliminate the scrapes, force all the scent to that one scrape, which makes it even more powerful. I hung that hemp rope, and I am really hoping that we can get this deer coming to that scrape and get in the situation where we could get him shot in October in that scrape. That's kind of my theory and hopes and goals. I think that's going to be the best October setup on the place. Now, in the rut, this stand and this stand are both just insane because you have an awesome doe bedding area, a wicked pinch, an up and over, a logging road, another doe bedding area here. Like this stand in the rut, I'd get in. I think I would choose this over this in the rut because most likely the deer you're after in the rut right here is probably going to shoot across and go by this stand. But I think this stand has a higher likelihood of getting more traffic from this direction as well. But I'm just super excited about. I'm excited about this for October, and I'm excited about both of these, especially this one for the rut with a westerly wind. Again, westerly wind, downwind side of all this cover.
So we're over here on the opposite edge from where the hemp rope is. I had a camera down here this year and the whole season. I got tons of traffic of these bucks, and the one we're hoping shows up down in here. And they were always angling this way, and I had never really been right in here, so I didn't know what exactly was going on. But after scouting this winter, I realized there's this really steep draw that comes up, and it pinches trails around the head of it. So if those deer are trying to come off that point and continue on in this cover, they're actually cutting out through the corner of the field and then shooting right back in. Plus there's an old logging road that goes down in, and then that connects the up and over traffic to, you know, the side we were talking about over there. And then again, there's another little subtle change in topography in and around the corner where those deer tend to relate to and bed on. So I'll kind of show you this spot. It's a little hard to see with it being so green, but I would be in this stand in the rut over that stand if I had my choice, because the winds kind of overlap. And the reason I'd be in this one over that one is because this one gets probably 80% of this traffic in the rut, but it also gets that traffic. So it just ups your odds because you get a little bit more different movement in this, across the field in this spot. You can see this trail here just beat down coming up this logging road. Funny story, you'll see my stand in a second here. I was missing a ladder, a lower ladder section and a center ladder section, so I ordered a new one. I got it, I brought it out here, I put up this ladder stand, I come back a few weeks later, and this branch fell out of the tree and smoked the 2 bottom railing sections that I just bought for the stand. So I gotta get 2 more sections to fix this, and I gotta cut this out of my road here to open this path of least resistance back up. But you can see the sign coming up here is crazy. And actually, another thought on that is I might just leave the branch where it is, because you can see where these deer have changed their pattern and they're coming a little lower and they're shooting into the field there. And what that does is it keeps them just a little bit further away from my stand for shot angle and just, general scent. You'd have to have a strong wind in October to hunt that and not get screwed when the thermal's pulled down this steep hill. But I think I actually will leave the branch right where it's at, because they found a new way out that works better for me. But you can see all these trails in here. Look at this sucker here. There's a super highway going right there. And then there's another one lower. And they're all coming right here and beating around that corner of that really, really steep ravine. This is like a spot where I didn't hang a stand, but it's a good spot. And if something starts happening in the season, I'm like, man, I really need to be right over there. Like, what I'll do is I'll pin it. So there's my stand pinned. And what I do, I will take a picture. Okay, so when I was scouting, that's that tree right there. I'll take a picture of it and attach it to the pin. That way, when I'm sitting there at home at night and I'm like, man, that deer's over right there, and I probably need to get down in there, I already have, I can look and be like, yep, I can't use a client, like I need a lock on, I need a Novix or whatever. So it kind of allows me to prep for my hunt by having that picture, or if I send a friend there or something, I can say, dude, this is the tree, hang and hunt. So like I said, it's kind of early to be putting cameras out. It's early June, but I'm up here. Farm like this, this is my lease farm. I can't do any development. It just takes more cameras, more moving around to get those pictures, which in turn, a lot of times, it's harder to make sense of the deer, that, putting together a plan on what's happening, because your intel is not as potent. On a fully developed farm like the other, farm that we're doing this video on, like, your camera spots are killer. You really know what's going on, because when they move, you get pictures of them. And it's just a lot easier and requires less cameras. So we're probably gonna be bouncing cameras around throughout the summer, adding cameras, putting some of them in these obvious spots for now, and we'll adjust. This is a sick spot. So we're gonna have to show you probably some topos to get an understanding of this time of year when it's all green, but there's a pond here and this cover connects to the neighboring farm. It's all broken up by these fields. And what's cool about this, all the scrapes that happen on this field happen on this lower edge. And my theory of that is because this hill all slopes up, and the time of year that they're scraping in the evening when they come out and do most of their scraping, the thermals are rolling down the hill. So all that scent is congregating down here on the bottom, and I think they get more rambunctious because of it, and this whole edge just gets tore up. There's a pond levee right here that connects, and the deer dump out right below the stand. So you'd hunt this with like a southwest or straight south, your thermals pull in behind you, the thermals roll off the field. This is like a textbook October stand. I think it's a little bit out of the runnings for this deer that we're hoping shows up this year. Last year I had a deer that I was really hoping was gonna make it, but he didn't. But he was on this pond last year, like, holy cow. I mean, he could have come in here in October and just smoked this thing. He was living on this water hole the entire summer, and into the deer season, he was smashing these scrapes. But this is where my buddy and me, Justin, came late season last year and shot that deer up in the corn. It was pretty awesome. He came out and wandered over there and he smoked while I was sitting up there above him. Unfortunately, I have not had a deer I was after yet this far north on the place, but when I do, this is a spot that puts him in a lot of trouble. This is an absolute classic rut funnel, all day sit. What you have is you've got all these points. There's a big point there, and there's a really big point there. There's an inside corner right here. And this is all bedding. There's lots of beds out on all these points. There's two huge ditches right here that go down. They connect and then they go out to a field in the bottom. These two ditches head out right here and create a skinny pinch that's about 30 yards from here to the field. So if I'm a big deer and we have a south wind, which is what this stand is set up for, I'm gonna come to these bedding areas and I'm gonna stay on the high side naturally anyway, scent checking all of this. And I'm also gonna get shoved through the point or the pinch right here in bow range. Because there's a huge concentration of scent right here, because of the pinches, there's also a massive scrape that shows up right here under this bush. So you have doe bedding areas, hunting the downwind side, on a pinch point, and a spot like this, you know, is so intrusive to get to. I would wait till gray daylight, you know, November 5th through the 14th, 15th would be the best times to hunt this. I'd wait till gray daylight, till the field's clear. I'd get on an e-bike and I'd fly through the fields all the way back here, and I'd just stash my bike right back here in the island of trees and walk down here, and I'd get in and I'd sit all day. We're going to put a camera back here on this scrape, even if I don't hunt here, because I don't know that I'm going to have a deer that I'm going to be targeting back here. But we're going to put a camera on this scrape this year, and there's going to be some serious bucks coming on this trail and hitting this scrape and stuff November 5th to the 14th this year. And I would venture to say you're going to see a bunch of midday walkers, you know, the 5th to the 13th. You're going to see deer from, you know, that 10 to 2 mark coming right through here. We're down here on the far end of the little field with the pond, and I threw up a ladder right here in this corner. There's a big huge scrape that pops up right here, and I got a lot of different bucks on this scrape. Again, I don't know if this spot is going to be in the game this year, but it's always good to have everything set up. There's a big point that goes off here into a lot of cover, and I think these deer relate to that point coming up to this field. So a lot of the traffic's here, concentration of scent, that's probably why the scrape's there. And I kind of see a situation where we get into October and a big deer is coming out right here, hitting this scrape and then working this edge. And so I hung a ladder there just in case that scenario plays out, so I'm already prepped. Because it's a really, really classic setup for October as far as, again, I don't have blinds here to hold my scent. And the way this field is sloped and there's a big ditch behind it, I could sit here with a west or even a northwest into the field a hair and just rely on the time that this deer comes out, my wind sucking hard into that hole behind it. So it lays out pretty good. All right, so this is the last spot we're gonna show you today. This is another one of those spots. Okay, first of all, it's got layers of things going on. It's an inside corner funnel, and it's on this side of all the cover. So if we hunt it with a southwest wind blowing out into the field, it's a gray daylight. We're on the downwind side of all this cover. It's a gray daylighter, meaning, you know, November 5th to the 13th, we're coming in after daylight and the deer clear the fields and hopping in here. It's another one of these spots where it's not steep as heck like everything, and there's there's literally a flat up there, which is one of the only flats. It's only a ½ acre. And then there's a nice subtle bench around here. And I think there's a lot of deer that bed on both of these. And this is the pinch between those two doe bedding areas on an inside corner. And I just think it's a really good rut funnel. The other thing is this flat goes up to the field, and it's kind of like a wedge, so it collects deer traffic, and it's also tied to that hedgerow, which goes over to the next farm over and connects the cover along that hedgerow. So there's just like compounding types of travel corridors and funnels that all meet here. I'm gonna hang a stand above the old ladder. So somebody that was hunting here at one point, you know, knew what the heck was going on, because that's, you know, 2 trees that we're hanging in that there's an old ladder in. No dummies. All right, so that kind of wraps up my lease where my hands are tied. We're gonna be moving cameras around throughout the summer, probably putting more in. But, you know, as you can see, a lot of the same, like, it's these things we talked about today are the foundation, you know, for developing a farm. It's kind of working off of the stuff that the deer are already naturally doing. And just one of the biggest things is, like our other farm, the developed farm, we're just creating much better ingress and egress. We're upping our camera locations, and the spot down by the hemp rope, you know, if it was our farm, we'd be hunting a little higher. We'd be in a box, so our thermals wouldn't be messing us up. We'd have a green to grain, perfect gap coming up that hill. So it all starts in the same places generally. It's just much easier to do it when you have the ability to manipulate. So that kind of catches you up to speed on the 2 farms. My developed kind of over the top, and then my farm that I can't really do a whole lot. We'll be doing things throughout the summer. It's just the beginning of June basically now, and we'll be filling you in on the different things we do throughout the year leading up to the season, and hopefully some target deer will show up, and eventually maybe we can even get one shot on camera.